Well, hello, one and all, and welcome to another episode of Interstellar Radio, a podcast focused on NACL, partnered now with Supernova and NRG Kia. We've got new partners, and of course, hosting it is still myself, RMC, alongside Gordo on my right, left, somewhere on screen over there. I don't know my lefts and my rights. And it's our second episode, and we've got another guest for today, a new guest, one with front row seats to the action in the NACL.
Yeah.
It's Cubby over there. Cubby, welcome to the show. We're going to make this a tradition. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Two truths, a lie. After you give your intro, we'll guess and try and figure out how much we know about you. So, Cubby, without further ado, if your camera's straightened, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good. All right. Two truths and a lie. One, I worked every League of Legends show that went through the Riot Studio at some point last year. Two, my nickname Cubby, I've had it for 15 years. And it originally does stem from my OG friend group, where I still play games with them today. As they gave it to me in COD Black Ops. And three, I come from a family of people that work in broadcast and on shows.
Okay,
That is it.
so you've worked every league show that went through Riot 2. That's the first one. I believe you did LCS for sure. You did NACL,
Yeah,
and you're
you did
definitely part of
LCS,
the.
NACL finals, and CLOL finals would be
This
the
is the
three.
this is the fun part for me, you know.
Yeah, just to not react when we get something wrong. I think number one's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Uh,
It does definitely come from a family of broadcasters. I remember you're very proud about your grandfather, who is a sports broadcaster, radio, if I recall correctly. So that's
then
definitely in
maybe
the
it's
family.
just origins for number two. Like, because surely it's some kind of Chicago baseball thing. I see a baseball diamond behind you on the stream. Uh,
Maybe.
so I mean, surely like the friend group origin or something could easily be an unfalsifiable lie.
So
Uh,
number two is the why.
I'm
That's
gonna
my
go
guess
with
unless
number
RMC wants
two.
to weigh in
No,
otherwise.
yeah, I think. Oh, the only one I'm thinking for number one is. Did he do? Is OQ? OQ's was never in studio, right? So
Nah,
No.
okay,
only
yeah,
only NACL, and even then not until finals.
okay, then yeah, I'd say it's number two. Yeah.
Okay. It kind of is number two I like my grandpa does like he did radio for a living, and my sister works
Mhm,
for CBS. And she's show side, not camera side or like on air or anything. But
mhm.
I mostly come from teachers, but I do have like family like has done broadcasting. In terms of number two, it kind of was my OG friend group, but where it really caught on was I worked a summer camp as a camp counselor. So I've they called me Cubby for like my like most of the time, since but like only them, right? I've only been Cubby like in their group. But where it
Okay.
really caught on was like camp because I was counselor Cubby. And then while like that was like after college, I could go back to college, like be in my esports program where I was also known as Cubby. So that's kind of like where it really started the stick. But
Okay.
So you've
Big
gone by
difference
Cubby
between.
IRL then.
yeah,
True.
I mean, dude, I had a bunch of kids. We had 600 kids go to this camp every week, and they thought I was Cubby.
That's fair.
And yeah, I was just Cubby to all of them. So
Yeah.
And now you have thousands of viewers who think of you as just Cubby as well. So
I wish I had thousands, but Travis Gafford has thousands of viewers, and I'm on Travis Gafford show, Hotline League. So yeah, it works out that way.
I've gone by
co-host of.
Gordo IRL for periods of my life. You never gone by RMC?
No,
RMC?
I didn't even go by RMC. I think it was either Rab or Beatdown who first started calling me that. Like before that, my name is a mouthful, right? Random Minion Caster, 6 syllables. It was a mistake, so they shortened it. I can't remember. It was one of the two of them, I think, who first
Have you
started
gone by the full
abbreviating.
6-syllable name? IRL?
I have. The funniest
Yeah.
one's when people call me Mr. Caster, and I'm just like, okay, you're not wrong, I guess, but
Mr.
lots of people
Casper.
by that. Yeah, like I'm okay with random. Minion's a little bit weird. Somebody just calls me a minion, but you know what? It's funny for the bits. Just call me Mr. Caster though. That one's kind of weird, but also funny in its own way.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That just
but
sounds like
big
they don't know your name and are
true.
just
Yeah,
referring to you by your profession.
yeah. We hired you, Mr. Caster. Do your job. But Cubby, big difference between a children's camp and a COD Black Ops lobby. Very, very different.
A little bit.
It's more similar than you might think.
True. You know what? I wasn't a big fan of
You
COD.
know,
So.
the COD games grew. You know, the kids grew with and grew out of them, depending on. But you know, yeah.
Okay. Well, talking about growing, let's talk a little bit about the growth that the NACL has seen specifically with their format, Fearless Draft. It was all the hype, all the
Yeah.
rage coming into it. And now we've had our first week. I'm going to be honest, my impressions of it were rather underwhelming. I didn't really feel like it had a big impact.
I mean, I'm kind of interested in like what you guys think because I have an opinion and I've gone over the games. There's only like one series I haven't reviewed, and I casted that one.
Mhm.
But I'll have some things to go over during CQ tonight when we're in between games. We just spread the Challengers League propaganda. But no, I'm kind of curious, like what I'm with you that it didn't have much of an impact, but I see a couple
Mhm.
instances where I think it could or it kind of has, and I'm interested to see where it goes. So I kind of want your thoughts first before I spoil those. That's all right.
Okay. Then let's go,
Yeah.
Gordo. I already dropped my
Yeah, I
comment.
do think, I mean, one of my concerns that I talked about before we started, I do think like kind of manifested, and I don't think it's a big surprise, which is that like nobody ever has to change their bands. I think that's like the most noticeable is that like I'm looking at the picks and bans on the wiki right now, and if you look at like blue band ones, R band ones, for the first phase, that is, they are like exactly the same vertically for every series. Like nobody really feels the need to change them up very much. I think there was one little shift that I think it was Cincinnati Fear did. I think they like swapped up to ban the Azir after it was
Hmm.
disabled for them. But other than that,
Mhm.
or maybe it was Mirage that did that. It must have been Mirage that did that in game two.
It was
Um,
both.
Yeah.
oh, okay.
Um, so that's actually one of the things that I picked up on is
Mhm.
that as the series goes on, banning a champ that you can't play has extra value, especially if it's a top tier champ like Azir. So
True.
that's one of like the small changes.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually seeing it now in the actual game, it's kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to go in and check like champ stats for players over the course of the season because they're now kind of capped on how much they can play one. And it'll be,
Mhm.
I think it almost makes it more interesting to see like how often they were able to force it through in a series, given that their pool now narrows as they get later in. So it almost makes them more likely to go to comfort picks as the series goes on in a way, uh, which is just kind of interesting to me. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly how that's going to affect our ability to analyze players looking at the season as a whole. But yeah, I don't know. That's just something that stood out to me a little bit. Otherwise, I think, yeah, it's hard to like be walking in looking at a game two or a game three and be like, oh, here's the effect of fearless. Like it's really obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll shift as we get into like best of fives and playoffs and stuff. But I agree, it's kind of like it's very easy to miss the impact that it's having, especially when you see teams swapping sides and therefore just kind of trading picks back, and it's like you can't really tell what's changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I also picked up on like there weren't too many changes, but like, I think like I saw a couple things like in the series, right? So there's one series where like each team had played Trundle, and so like for me in that pick ban, like Poppy goes up in value for one team, and I believe the team that was going up against the Poppy actually took it away later on. It's like that is one of the common answers to Poppy is Trundle. I think it's really good. Um, I saw another one where I actually like how I'll talk about this more like when we get to Maryville specifically, but in games 1 and 3, the wins they picked up, they very much designed a comp around one champion
Mhm.
or like a core champion. And I think that we'll see that be a little bit more common where it's like, hey, like later in a draft, we see a squishy comp. Can we run a Viego comp and get resets, right? Like we can piece a lot of pieces that go into a Viego comp because like we're trying to get the first kill of a fight, right? Um, so like that's where oh god, what did they play that game? That was like a little bit off kilter, but like I thought really helped. Um
Was it the misfortune that they ended up picking up
yeah.
for Jerry? Yeah.
Yeah, like they play the MF bot and like the MF like for me like that's a pick that all of a sudden that gets a lot of value if you're like able to press ER and take away half their health. You have a Viego
Yeah.
on your team and just one Viego reset, and like you can win, right? The MF's not a pick that a lot of people are going to play, but that is one where like in a game 3 they were able to dig and find something like that works, and there were a lot of 80s off the table from Bans and Fearless. So that was actually kind of like a cool moment for me. It's like, hey, Maryville's kind of onto something. Or the other thing, like Quacker in the 2-0, he played Darius game one, so that's off the table for the rest of the series, right? In a best of five,
Mhm.
that could matter a lot, right? And that could be something that they talk about, like in a best of five, like, hey, we know that like when Quacker gets Darius, then we have a decent chance to win games. Is this the best game to do it? Like, are we gonna get another Darius angle? Like, or if we know that Dragoon like is gonna play Mordekaiser or Darius, like maybe we want to let that out early in the drafts, then we can pick some of the champs that we like that are like really that could actually be like a mind game that we see in a couple series, with like some of these weird champ pools. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing like how it changes, but I saw a few remnants of like what people are playing around with or figuring out. But I don't think it had a super major impact either.
Yeah, and I think that was my sort of gut instinct after watching that, especially day one, which was both 2-0 games. Spoilers if you haven't watched it, go watch it before watch the podcast. Yeah, it was 2-0 games on Saturday, and those two games I did not feel at all the impact of Fearless Draft, realistically. But I agree. I think the second day when we start seeing game threes, there were some interesting picks that start to come through. The Viego pick as well for AOE kind of stuck out to me as well because I did not see that one. That wasn't a champion. It was top of my mind whatsoever. And I wonder we start seeing more interesting picks like that come out, things which aren't very meta, aren't particularly things that we're used to seeing right now. And again, it's only first week, so teams are probably starting to figure out the fearless drop themselves, like you mentioned, Cubby, the sort of strategies they want to come into it with. But yeah, right now, I think we'll probably have to wait for best of fives to really start having fun with the drop format.
Yeah. This might also be reading too much into it, but I wonder how much it's kind of like giving face up info about what players are willing to play on stage to other teams, right? Like I do wonder as these teams, because
Or
we've
mind
only seen
games.
teams play one series, we've seen some teams play zero series, but once we start getting over to week 3, week 4, if you start showing these tendencies and it's like, hey man, this guy plays Azir, Corki, Oriana every series that goes to 3, is like, maybe his pool is a little bit more limited than it may first appear, and that'll inspire people to start banning out some of those control mages. Whereas in the past, they just play Azir 3 games in a row, and there's just kind of this assumption like, well, if we ban the Azir, surely there's other champs coming up. But if Fearless series in and out, they're playing the same 3, 4 picks, I think that makes it a little bit more obvious if a player's champion pool is limited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is true. Like sometimes you just get best of fives where Corky is zero's handshake for the entire time. Like that's no longer doable, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know. Like I know that I'm kind of curious to see like how this pans out, right? Because in a sense, I think that like in order to be a pro for a long time, you're going to have to find a way to play in any meta, right? And I'm wondering, I think there's something to be said, or like a theory at least, like kind of exposing players to having a lot of breadth, like early on in their career versus depth. Like, hey, here are all the ins and outs of Corki Azir. We're going to be playing this a lot. So like, if you figure that out, maybe that will help you out with more matchups. Versus like, hey, you've never been like, you have to play marksman, mage, and assassin mid all in the same series, right? Like, if that's every day of scrims, like, does that actually help you get better, or like, does the prior like is that better for you? As I actually don't have an answer for. I kind of think that breadth is important early on to get people thinking about all the above, but also I can see the value of like, not being exposed to depth, um, and that being detrimental. So I am kind of curious to see what kind of impact it has as we move forward. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I can see teams definitely trying to maybe cheese that as well. If you've got enough depth on a small pool, maybe you never get to that game three. Maybe you never get to that game five, right? Like I can imagine, I'm trying to think, say Wildcard, right? Quacker just slamming Darius every single game one, right? Because he's that good
Yeah.
on it. And then he's got what Darius, Olaf, and what's the other one that he's known for playing?
I think of
I'm trying to
Darius
remember.
Olaf. Is there a third?
Is there there's a third one. I just can't recall it off the top of my head. Another Bruiser-esque champion. And if he just gets
Kasante,
stuck into that.
Renekton,
Renekton. That was the one I
there
was
it
thinking. Yeah.
is.
He's
He
good at
grinds so much
those,
on
but
it.
I don't know if they're
Yes.
my They're my first thoughts.
Very good.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, he's gotta have at least 3, right? Because best of 5 need to win 3. You get good enough at those 3, if they're not banned out, then you just kinda, like, cycle through. I could see
Mhm.
some players maybe trying to cheese it that way, going for that depth instead and becoming, like, specialists at just a handful of champions. But yeah, unfortunately, we won't find that out till playoffs. So, any other thoughts on the Fearless format?
I think it's fun. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I learned a couple things, but I don't know like past that. What's up?
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, now we get to the meat of the week. Of course, it's first week. We got to see a little bit about the teams, and that's really what we're here to talk about. So, let's talk about the teams. Any standouts, any surprises that came through after watching them actually on the Rift the first time?
Wild card. I think we just have to we almost just have to start there, right? I don't think many folks had wild card taking TL. I was also like a bit surprised that Maryville took down AOE, but I think early on in the season, like both Maryville and Wildcard have a lot of direction because they've been playing together for a long time in the sense of like that Wildcard core four.
Mhm.
And then with Maryville, like they also seem to have a little bit more direction with. I mean, usually Spyrax are very experienced playing together, and I think that like Scary Jerry and Psycho very experienced playing together. I know Wixie and Breezy and like Rose Torno and that have played together in the past, but maybe not as much as like a core stack of five. I think that it's more visible early on that like for me, like the teams that had more direction in week one, I feel like ended up winning. I think that the four teams that won, like there are a lot more moments where, like, they're either playing together on the Rift, like, actually making plays as a team, or there's, like, a clear direction, like, whether it's good or bad, we are going to do this. And I actually think that's who won the first 4 games for Challengers League.
I think that's fair. I think the fun overreaction to do though is like these results with the upset for wild card. I think pretty much everybody would say that's an upset. And then I think a lot of folks would label the Maryville win an upset as well. Like if you're looking over towards probably what most consensus opinion looked like, what those polls that Salty Runback ran looked like. Uh, these were some of the bottom of the table teams in people's eyes. The fact that they're able to come out and win week one, it feels like there's at least a chance that we kind of break away from the pattern we've had since NACL expanded to feature amateur teams, where we have a couple of teams kind of just sitting at the bottom, not really able to get very many wins, and kinda out of contention for at least being able to make a run to playoffs and instead, or at least a deep run in playoffs and instead trying to compete to avoid relegation. Feels like there's a chance for a really high parity league here, assuming that some of these bottom tier teams are able to keep up that performance, right? Wildcard gets the win. Maryville makes some last minute changes. They get the win. I think Mirage Alliance looked pretty competitive. Maybe Lit is just going to get blown out of the water next week, and they're gonna live down to people's opinions of them. But yeah, there's a shot, right, that there you could be really competitive as well. And in that point, it really does feel like we're getting a little bit more into a real open league where there's a very large middle ground, right? There's probably still going to be top tier teams, but maybe not so many bottom tier teams, just a really big mid tier.
Yeah, and the thing is, Gordo, we say that okay, a lot of people didn't have wildcard near the top, but I do want to emphasize that this was a roster who I didn't think would perform well initially, even with the whole like core four sort of idea, because Docs are just role swap. I actually thought this team would scale through the
Yeah,
split. So
it's a good point.
seeing them coming in swinging to me is really exciting because if they are coming in swinging already from the get go, and honestly, Docs actually looked pretty good. Even on the Yasuo game, I mean, they are melee into a kind of a bit of a rough matchup. He came back into it, skilled up. Like if you're already able to do that, then I kind of like the trajectory that wildcard gaming is on. Because I, whenever you've got Winnie and Darkwings on a team too, you can never count them out. Both of them are really, really good at coming back, even when they're behind. What I think surprised me more in that matchup was how TL Challengers played out. Because I personally wasn't high on Jenkins and Romer, hearing them coming in, but
Okay.
I had no tape on Romer, to be fair. So
Okay.
I didn't have the best read on it. Cubby, I know you were a huge fan of them, so I'd love to hear you kind of explain what
Yeah.
happened in that series.
I mean, for me, like yeah, Jenkins, like he's always been a pretty solid top laner. Like my top lane rankings, I thought top lane was gonna be really competitive this split, given that we have Surdy, Jenkins, and Tenacity in the league.
Mhm.
Not to mention like a lot of the other names. Like I think Philip had a decent split. Quacker can play as champs at a really, really high level. Like I think top lane's a legitimately really competitive role. Um, this game, for me again, I think the wild card just had like a lot more direction. Um,
Mhm.
game one was a bit of a disaster for TL.
Yeah.
Um, in the sense that like just nothing went their way. I'm trying to pull up like some pick bands here so I can refresh my memory. I more so remember game two because wildcard were losing 4-16 at one point, and we're down like 3K gold, which really isn't a lot. And also like had Senna scaling, and pretty much decided like, F it, we're gonna group. And they just grouped as five, and TL like they just didn't
Didn't.
find the wombo. Like they
Yep.
had like Maokai Nautilus Rumble, and I like every single time I saw those alts come out, like there was one time where it was at the same time and they got like an instantaneous double kill. And we're like, whoa, that's so satisfying. Like you would sync up the alts and like things are good. And then for the rest of the game, I just would see like one come out, like another one get panic used. Like there was just not enough synergy between those members. And yeah, like it ended up the game was like turned on its head, and wild card ended up winning that one. The first one, Winnie just blew up bot lane with level 3s in Zhao gank.
That
And
and
then
Quacker
Correct.
kinda just
yeah,
broke
then there was a
everything
solo
from
kill
there. Yeah.
top from Quacker. That was a Quacker Darius game. That's
It
right.
Yeah,
was.
That was
it
fun.
was.
Yeah,
That one I'd put down to a draft diff. Like, that was a mistake giving Quacker
I
star 5.
well, I don't think it was 100% draft diff. It was definitely some player diff if we're getting solo kills, that early. But also I remember like
Quacker
seeing Keel like try and save things top lane, like level 6, and then he
yeah,
like
no.
queued into a brush, and it's like, yep, this game's over. I like once like the Q flash missed, it's like this is it. Like
Was that the one? That's the one where Quacker just kind of got the double kill out of it, right? I think Winnie actually
yeah,
walked
yeah,
away
yeah.
with one of the kill credits, but
Wasn't that the I
it
mean,
was
Yeah.
basically a
Jenkins
1v2 from
walked into
Quacker.
that too. Like, Jenkins was basically dead. Keel was probably just, like, disengaged,
I
and Jenkins turned it back in.
I got to watch a Darius alt someone for 1,200 true damage, and that's about all I need for that game.
That's
So
fair.
fun times. Yeah, I think like Wildcard had a lot of direction, and I think the fun part, like Winnie is a strong jungler. Winnie like has played well in this league whenever like he's like competed in it. Well, to the point where like
Mhm.
he's not winning. Like he hasn't won in a while. Like I think the last time that he was like really good was honestly his AM runs and Proving Grounds when he was with Wildcard and he was with Bradley, and also the team that shall not be named with Zazel. And that crew was really good as well. Um, I'm Winnie gives his team direction. Like when you are
Yep.
playing with Winnie, you are going to have direction of the game, right? And I think that game two is a big example of that. I mean, game one and two, like in the sense that Winnie he knew that like, hey, if I go to bot lane at this time or the right time, then this gets turned on its head and we're good to go, right? Um, so yeah, I think that again, like I think Wildcard had a lot more direction and TL just did not play together at all. So I want to see that hopefully change moving forward.
Yeah, I think there were definitely multiple times in game two where it felt like Roamer was bot lane and not able to get a TP off in time to be able to join up and turn around some fights. Like Wildcard
Mhm.
basically sneaks a Baron, and I think a decent amount of the reason that TL can't take the fight before the Baron goes down is because Roamer has no good wards to go to, and he has to TP to mid lane instead. That's a solid distance away. So hard to call who should have put the ward and where, or should somebody have just thrown a ward down so that he could TP closer. Wasn't anybody able to do that. And then similarly, he's pretty late on the TP up towards a top lane fight where the game pretty much gets decided, or at least where the game gets turned around. It's where Wildcard kind of have like a 3 to 4K gold swing and they bring the gold back in their favor. That's a fight that kind of starts and ends before Roamer is able to get involved. So definitely feels like there might be some communication synergy issues there with getting everybody together and getting everybody to the fight to make a wombo comp like that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
on that subject though, uh talking about both wildcard and TL and what they were able to do, moving on to the rest of the week, so maybe not talking about that subject, did want to bring up we had two different teams kind of make some big last minute roster swaps over the course of the week and have
mhm.
kind of differing results about it. I guess we could talk about Mirage Alliance first. Mirage Alliance pretty much change out over half their team. They roll swap 2 players and then bring in a new player, a third new player. So their whole team looks completely different apart from Alorum and RJS. They have a we can call it a close. They have a 3-game series against Cincinnati Fear there. How do we feel like they looked, and how do we feel in general about the roster changes that they've gone through? Because we evaluated this team as a completely different roster when we did intros
Yeah.
last week.
Yeah.
So what I do know is that in the offseason, I was actually talking with Prismal a bit, and that this was in a move that was like, I don't want to say like the initial move was on the table, but the fact that like he could be playing AD or support and Dardoch could be jungle or support in this roster was a thing and an idea. And honestly,
Mhm.
if you think about it, given the new rules with the 3 out of 5 needing to be the same for your team, that is kind of an advantage like going into the next split. Like that is actually something that Mirage Alliance, like in theory, could have used to their advantage, right? I thought the initial roster they came out with was fine. I also thought this one was fine. Any issues with it were just in how it was handled and the lateness of it, right?
Mhm.
I don't have an issue with like the roster that was built. Um, I think that like I've seen Prismal be a really strong AD. I was personally hoping to see Prismal play support because I think that Prismal is a like he peaked higher for me as a support. Like I think that Prismal like he was a good AD. I think that Prismal as a support was also good. And I think given that like I know that he talks in comms. Like I know that he gives direction in the game. Those are things that are more valuable, like considered in NA than like at support than AD. And AD like has been scouted out pretty well. And for me, Prismal, sometimes like in the game, he gets caught because he tries to make plays. That happens, and that's more okay when you're a support, and that's okay when you're an AD. If you think about it, like as the role. Um, I also know that like this team, from what I heard, is that like they were just taking too many bad fights. And I think that like one of that was Dardoch and Prismal being jungle support, and now they're AD in support. And I think they'll get better at laning. It might somewhat prevent taking the bad fights, but I don't think that like I think that this roster, like, they will need to figure out how to take better fights. And I like to be fair, like I didn't really see that as much in their 3-game series. Is like just from like what I've been hearing, like talking with like other teams like who have practiced against them, right? And it is scrims, like people go for a
Boombox.
lot of stuff. Um, for what it's worth, I think that game one, the one that they won, they put around RGS really, really well. Like they were gifted an advantage on the map because Will had 2 camps before Poppy had 1 with Chad. And Dardoch had and Prismal had Prio bot because they drafted Varus, and they used that to attack the Akali lane, which can win into Azir, and it went really well for them, right? Like Azir can't like if a game goes through and like Akali is able to get out of that matchup the way she should, which is pretty much even, Azir should never be able to play in the side lane against Akali. But when your Azir's up like 40, 50 CS and up like a full freaking item, like that doesn't matter anymore, right? And RGS played that game really, really well. RGS had a great game that game. He played that Azir carry out really well. From there, it felt like Fear had a lot more direction and more of Chad's plays and map splits worked. Like Chad
Yeah.
nuked the jungle in game 2.
Yes.
And a couple of Mirage Alliance's lanes, like they just went okay or like they struggled. And then game 3, um, Toasty was able to go bot before RGS, and Toasty blew up the game too. So I think that they could have played around the Nico a little bit better in that game. But I also want to give Toasty credit that I thought that he played really well. So I'm not worried too much about them. I expect them to be still about the same as where I had them in the tier list, quite frankly. Just given like the roster and like what I expect. I think the biggest thing that you can take away from Raj Alliance that RGS played well. So that's I think that's a good sign for them moving forward. Because again, mid is not the role that I think is like fantastic this split, and I do think that Toasty is like one of the better, more promising mids that we have in the league like already. From like
Mhm.
what I've been hearing and some of the tape I've seen on him like so far. So I'm excited to see more. But RGS had a really good game against him, and it's not like he griefed the other games against him. So I think that's a good sign for Raj Alliance fans.
That's fair. I was actually kind of on the other side because I was looking at Cincy Fear. Toasty was the one who like really caught my eye, and I know he's known to like be a really good Nico player, but man, some of those ults they look so clutch. Like he
He's
was
good.
catching people right at the tip of it, and
That's
he like
that's like his best champ, from what I've like heard and like seen in combines too. Like
mhm.
he's good at finding angles. I'm less surprised because I actually had expectations for Toasty, which for a player like that's a big compliment to give someone that has not played a game of Challengers League yet. But I do have some
Yeah,
expectations for him, like based on what I've heard, you know. So yeah, so far like game 1 was what it is, but I thought the game 3 like made up for it tenfold, you know.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly, and especially because it was RJS is up against as well, right? Like we've got a couple of new mids in the NACL this split. Some who are less tested, who you'd expect Tosi to maybe do better against. But RJS is somebody who is, the name gets bandied around a lot. He has prior experience and whatnot. So, yeah, get in even at the LCS level. So, well, he's subbed in for the LCS, I guess. And he's academy level. So watching Toasty get those sort of games against RJS was really exciting to me. The other person was, as you mentioned, Chad. Man, Chad lived up to his name that game too. He just walked in and took over
Yeah,
everything. It was just
I
awesome to watch.
so I actually game 2, I reviewed it, and I will say that RGS dropped like, he died to a gank from Chad early on,
Yep.
but the ward he dropped was a little lazy. You're going up against Trundle, and you put the ward in the embankment brush. You gotta put that one in the river. Because what happened is that Chad ended up taking the next spawn of the Raptors and Krugs away from Will on the top side, and Will didn't know. So then Will had, like, this minute, like 90-second gap where like so he was bot and he was gonna base and then he was going to like take his top side and then he just didn't have those. And then that's where I really realized like how much XP junglers get from grubs. It's actually really good. If you want to have
Yep.
your jungler like hit 6 first, grubs matter a lot. And Chad was level 6 to 4 as Trundle in the Xin, and you don't get to play the game as Xin if that's the case, because Trundle just nukes you. And I'm really glad that we're seeing in Challengers League actually Trundle get played in the Xin. I think that one of the reasons that we're not seeing it as much in LCS is that I've been seeing more top sides locked early, and there are some ADs that are really good. Also, playing Trundle into like Lucian Zeri just sucks ass. And so, like, if those ADs are like being taken, like you have like a Milio of Felios, or you have like just stuff that like it's pretty like easy to like get around from Trundle or like cut him out and deal with them like Zeri and Lucian, then you can't
Mhm.
play Trundle. But I'm really glad that we're seeing that in challengers and like good drafts because I think Trundle was used really well in a couple series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even when Aloran played him top, I was actually really impressed with that as well.
Hmm.
Because if I recall correctly, he blinded the Trundle, right? Like he saw the Poppy, and I think they were assuming the Poppy was going top, but ended up being flexed to the jungle, and it's a deer top instead. And Aloran still dumpstered that lane.
Hmm.
So yeah, I like seeing Trundle. I think it's really strong in the meta. So I don't want to knee-jerk the reaction, and I know that there was some bad press the way Mirage Alliance handled the sort of role swap. So I'm with Cubby on this. I don't think the roster's weak by any means. I think that Cincy Fear took really big advantage of the fact that this roster probably didn't have that much time together, didn't have the clearest game plan, and Fear just played a very aggressive game and never gave them really the space to kind of breathe. So yeah, I think it's really well played from Fear, and to me that's a good sign, especially in this early part of the season. I think you can take quite a few games just by knowing your team, playing well, and pressuring opposing teams, which haven't quite connected or figured out sort of how they want to play it.
Yep. The other thing about that game number two is that I recall there's like a 4 versus 5 bot lane fight that somehow ends up 0 for 0. And Chad spends the whole time. He just gets like 3 or 4 plates top in the entire first turret because of grub buff. And I mean, that's kind of nutty too. Like, that's just such a huge influx of power into that Trundle. And you got to wonder how many times do you play out that bot fight and actually end up going 0 for 0 and not able to like eke out some kind of advantage for the 5 man squad? So maybe a little bit to be discussed there. I recall some really close fights in that second one where like Philip Olaf like just by the skin of his teeth and the skin of his sundered sky survives some fights, and he ends up
Dude, the Sundered Sky healed for like
yeah, in
450
that bot lane
HP
fight.
in
Yeah,
those two. Like, I saw two autos where it was like plus 180 and like plus 250. I'm like, holy crap, this item's not okay. Like,
yeah, and it's
oh
like
my god.
this patch has been out for like 2 weeks. There's no way Philip is sitting there like hard calculating it in his brain, like, oh, Sundered Sky gets me out of this 1 versus 2. Like, I think it just kind of works out that way. They both sides play it by feel, and Philip ends up winning. So it's like I think it's hard to take away huge swaths of like, especially out of that game number two. Like, I think there's a world where Mirage does better in that game number two. Um, the game number three is where I think they manifest my concerns for them a little bit more. You mentioned like just taking some bad fights as being something you had heard about or something you expected from this team. I do think like there's multiple fights, right? Or there's multiple ganks where Toasty's able to just shove in mid, walk bot down through river, not even TPing, it's just walking down there. And it really feels like there should be a call from Mirage that, hey, we got to back out there. The second time he does it twice in a row and kills them both times. The second time, especially, is like RJS is under towers. Oriana Toasty has just pushed him in and disappeared, and Prismal and Dardoch are going in during that fight, and they just get Nocturne ulted and they get double killed, and it's kind of a disaster from there. Not to shortchange Toasty's play. I think it was really really good, but definitely seeming like there's a little bit of over aggression for the bot lane or not communication with the mid lane there in understanding that the Nico can be there and is there to really shut it down. I do think game one though was exactly what I want to see out of this Mirage team though. I think like one of Dardoch's best performances as a support. He played a couple splits of ACL, so I got to see a bunch of Dardoch support.
Yeah.
uh is when he's just like playing something like the Rel or Alistair or Nautilus
Yeah.
and just roaming up mid constantly all game, every game. When he was with Neo, he was really good at being able to do that. Neo just hanging out bot lane, farming up. Dardoch just constantly ganking mid and setting his mid laner ahead. And they did that game number one, and I think it worked great for them. That's the play style I want to see out of this Mirage team more.
Nice. Yeah,
Anyway,
I think
oh,
I agree. Like I also share the same thing with you and Dardoch. I think Dardoch actually knows how to impact map pretty well from support.
yeah,
So yeah,
that's
I wasn't surprised to see that.
those jungler genes, I'm
Hmm.
sure. But so other team that had some big changes there
Okay,
is
yeah.
Maryville University.
Yeah.
And what we hypothesized last time, RMC, it came true. We were joking
Yeah, the
about, hey,
rumor.
technically they could bring back Niles. I have heard Niles is doing grad school in Maryville, so he's technically it's not like they're just pulling him from totally outside of the school, but he is back, and they got themselves the old fly challengers mid jungle as well, thanks
Yep.
to that, moving Spyrex back
Yeah.
to mid and getting Yuji in the jungle. It's not exactly what Kelsey and I requested last week. I would have liked to see Kachu, but I wasn't considering Niles a possibility, so I'm pretty happy with what they got going here. And I was gonna say that I didn't think Yuji could salvage that team if it was still going to be Spyrax top, get back mid. But now that it's Spyrax mid, Niles top, I think the team looks kind of good. Like I don't think this is my bottom two. This is a bottom two team for me anymore.
No, me neither. I think very highly of Spyrex and Yuji. These guys have
Mhm.
been towards the top of the table in Challengers League for a long time. Playing together for 2 years. Now on year three, they're good. Spyrex, someone that like when I was arguing, that like, hey, like it's okay that Immortals imported Mask because like we went through a lot of mids. Part of that was like, hey, like we did have players step back. Like Spyrex went to school and Spyrex said like, I don't know if I want to like go pro. I don't know exactly where Spyrax is sitting on that. I've always thought that Spyrax is a very good player. So I'm rooting for Spyrax, and he played well in this series. To really not my surprise whatsoever. Um, I mean this duo is like yet to break top four. Um, or I think they broke top four finally last split, and then they dropped. I don't exactly remember the
I thought they were fourth
order of
in
events.
spring. I will double check that.
No, they
Continue
lost to
on though,
Fear,
please.
and they lost to Fear in the 5-6 game.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, for me, I think my challenge for Maryville is that I know that like some of the pieces are different, but they have had pieces that have played together. And again, there's a lot of direction with this team. Um, I want to see them play better in the second half of the season. Because if we were Challengers fans last split, which I know that we are in here, I think Maryville were like 8-10 or 9-9 or 10-8 after the first round robin. And then they had a really bad second round robin. Like, they actually had the worst second round robin in the league. And I think a lot of that was because early on they were benefiting from the fact they play together as a team. Like they play
Yep.
collegiate, right? Like these guys have been playing scrimming for a lot longer. And once other teams kind of caught up and like, hey, here's how we work together, Maryville were getting beaten. And I don't want to see that happen again. And I don't want to give them like the same pass because like there are elements and components that have played together here, not all as like one, synergistic piece. But again, I look at this match and it's very clear. Like Maryville had more direction in this game. And AoE, like, for me, didn't show up to the degree that I was hoping to see them show up in this series. Um, I will say that I think that the game 3 draft, like, Maryville had was, like, kinda creative, and once Viega goes, like, he goes, but also, why are we taking the dragon fight when everyone hit 6 when you're going up against a Viego MF Rel, with a Nico, you know? Like, that's not you don't take that fight at 6. You let them have that and then move on. And I'm wondering if, like, maybe that's an early season thing. It's like, "Oh, we can do it." It's just they aren't on the same page. I'm interested in that, but, um, I had AoE as middle of the pack. I would move Maryville if they stick with this roster in middle of the pack. I don't know if they're gonna stick with it or not. Um, but yeah, I would I don't know, like, I'm kinda curious, like, would you guys put AoE or Maryville, like, above the other, like, by the end of the season? Because I think at the start of the season, like, before when we saw the other Maryville roster, I saw AoE above for the most part, and after week 1, do we have anyone wanna make some changes?
Uh,
Any hot
I mean, I'm
takes?
definitely disappointed with what we saw out of this AoE team. I mean, I'm gonna need to
It
see
wasn't a
more
good week
before I
1.
before I
Yeah.
write them
Yeah.
off. Yeah, I just need to see more before I write them off, and that's the kind of thing. Normally, when we do this show, we talked about before we started recording. This time last year, we had watched 36 games in week 1. Now we've watched 10, and 2 teams we haven't even seen yet. So it's really tough to kind of make snap changes to your power rankings because the teams that you've only seen against one opponent, and the teams that you haven't seen, you haven't seen. So it's really difficult to make big moves like that. I think I still believe in this AoE team a little bit more, but I do. What really gets me excited about Maryville is how good Scary Jerry and Psycho looked. I think they really showed up well in the 2-on-2. I'm pretty high on Wixie Breezy as a lane. I think both of them individually are quite good. I think both of them look very good in off-season combines and ACL and stuff, like individually. And the fact that they just looked really dominant for Scary Jerry and Zyko throughout most of the series, I think is a very good sign for them and how well they were able to perform. So I think, I have a lot of confidence in Spyrex Yuji, like you already described, Cubby. I
Mhm.
think Niles is solid, and if Scary Jerry and Zyko keep this up, I think this is just a good team.
Yeah, I agree. I think Maryville, with the roster changes they've made, to me at least, is a solid middle of the pack, slightly higher than middle of the pack, or actually no, yeah, I put them above middle of the pack, like above average with this roster. Seeing Spires go back to mid,
Could push top four, especially if TL stays looking not great.
potentially, yeah. I mean, Spyrex going back to mid was a big one for me. And usually actually finally playing mid. The thing is, I've seen Maryville play through fall through that sort of Spyrex top lane, um, iconic jungle, sort of get back in the mid lane roster. That didn't excite me, and that was the roster I thought they were going to be coming in with. But having Yuji come in, having Spyrex come down, it's not a out of the blue move. These guys have been on the roster for a while for this team. So it's something that they knew Maryville in the back of the mindset. This is a potential possible configuration. The only question was, of course, who would take the top lane? And it was going to be Spyrex top probably because Niles, I don't think Maryville was fully confirmed that Niles would be coming back as a master student right away. So I think through most of fall they were playing, assuming that Niles wouldn't be available at all for collegiate.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
I
As
think
his
I mean,
challenger,
he was
actually.
coaching, like, he
yeah, he
was
was
in a
coaching.
coaching role with this team, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's still
Mm,
very familiar with how the team operates, right? And even more, he'd be more familiar with Spyrex as well now because he's been working with Spyrex a lot, 1v1 in the top side. But what I think I'm with Gordo on this, what really makes me excited watching this game was Scary Jerry kind of regaining form. I remember I did an interview with Scary Jerry, I think it was for NECC or ECAC, I can't remember which one, where he was saying that like he feels like he lost kind of his peak form he had back on Converse when he was super exciting. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is the next big guy. He's going to contest the likes of Shogo and Masu," um, and then he kind of fell off a little bit. But I think this is a Scary Jerry. I kind of remember watching him from game one, game three. Good positioning, really solid, knows how to play aggressive.
Like Converse
Does
era Scary Jerry.
Yeah, he's doing the damage and he doesn't get caught out, and he's doing that on a team now who can actually really support him and play around him. So if Scary Jerry can maintain this form, I'm actually really excited to see what he can do. Like in my mind, I've got him almost like Sajed and Rock Boom levels of hype right now. If he can
Oh,
maintain
really?
this form, if he can maintain the form, the big problem I have with Scary and Jerry and why I don't rate him quite that high yet is because I don't think he's as consistent in the late game. Like if you get Sajed to a late game, he's going to carry a team fight. That's pretty safe. Okay, Rock Boom. Oh, man, Rock Boom I'm a little bit more mixed on because I still remember him when he first started out, and that guy was aggressive. He's hilarious, but he'd get very, very hypey. And to be fair, he's tempered that a lot, so he has improved a ton. So my opinion of him is partially marred by that, and I need to get myself past that right now. But if I take everybody else's opinion of him, he sounds like he's the next big thing. He's going to be able to contest Sajed. He's like the big thing. I think Scary Jerry can be there if Scary Jerry is consistent, which is a pretty big caveat.
Yeah. Called it out last week, right? With Arrow, King, Masu, Meech all gone. Like best
Yeah.
80 carry in NACL is wide open. I think yeah, whoever
Yeah.
wants to step up and take it can definitely take it.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Okay, Cubby,
You have a
you
strong
sound like you
opinion on who
disagree.
you think
So
is like
yeah,
best bot lane NACL?
I do think it's somewhat up for the taking, but I think my favorites are going to be Sajed, Chime, and probably Spawn Kim down. They didn't have a good first game or series, but I do think that like those two. Oh, actually no, Array Diamond. Actually, I'll throw them
Array
in there.
Diamond's also
yeah,
very
Ray
Yeah,
Diamond has
interesting.
I'm
another.
actually kind of excited to see how they look. I actually think that Array Diamond like should probably have it.
Okay, so you're looking at them as duos. Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I
No,
was
I
looking
I
like
actually think like they should
ADK's in
have it.
isolation.
I want to see where Array's at after a year of subbing or split of subbing.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I thought really highly actually of Array and Prismo as a lane. I was really bummed to not see them play in summer. So I'm excited to see both of them back. And I know Prismo's 80 now, but I'm think Diamond could be good for Array because Array is definitely someone that does see fights well, doesn't
Yep.
lane as well, and Diamond is a lot of direction, and that could be really good for Array and lane. So yeah, I think they should actually be the best bot lane.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
for me. To me, Array and Diamond was going to be the big test with Sajid and Chime because I think they Sajid is being marketed to me as a big team fight monster. Well, guess what Array is? Array was the original team fight monster. You get into
Yeah.
the late game, he would carry you a team fight. So I really want to watch Fly Challengers versus Supernova for that bot lane specifically because I think if Array wins that, yeah, then I think he's going to be top in the league. If Sajid wins that, then oh, things get exciting at that point. Then I think AD carry is like truly, truly wide open at the point.
Yeah.
I still got my fingers crossed for Wixie Breezy, man. I really had pretty high expectations for those
See,
guys, and
yeah, I will say that I felt like Scary Jerry looked good because I don't think the Wixie and Breezy played well in the first
I
set,
I
and
agree. They
I
didn't
That's
don't
fair.
think
play well.
Wixie played well. I want to see more
Yeah.
in the next series. So I'm hoping that's just it
Yeah.
was a 4 series thing. But yeah.
No, yeah. Craziest thing. So I didn't watch Sunday live because I was doing NACLQ
Mhm.
VODs in the morning. So I was like well behind. I was just watching LCS, trying my best to avoid spoilers throughout the day. But I did get a text from a friend who doesn't normally watch NACL, was tuning in because of Fearless Draft and all that stuff, and it just said Scary Jerry is next up, and I'm like, what is going on in the NACL right now? Where this is what I'm getting from somebody who doesn't watch the league, like. I had like pretty much written it off for an AOE win coming into the day, so I was pretty shocked at seeing that. But I don't know, good showing to start things off. We mentioned Array and Diamond already. I think that's as good a spot as any to get into discussing week number 2, where Supernova, after having been snubbed in week number 1, has 2 series to play. So we're gonna get to see a whole bunch of Array Diamond. We're gonna see more of Array Diamond than we'll have seen of a couple of teams by the end of this upcoming week. How do we feel about week number 2 as a whole, and what are we kind of looking forward to here?
I just want to open up by saying I think it's so it's so unlucky for Supernova. They're the only team that has to play at least in these first 2 weeks, like back to back days, and I
Oh
think that
yeah, let me
actually
check if other teams. Well, I mean,
the
we do have
others
like
won't have
super
it,
weeks
but
coming. Like these are
right.
the only weeks where we have um like it's 2 and 2, right? So they're yeah, Supernova, they don't play week 1 and then they're like, "Surprise."
Back to
Uh,
back.
yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's unfortunate in a way that like they'll have to play back to back. Their prep is gonna have to be a little bit more rushed, I guess. But on the other hand, I guess the benefit is other teams you have 24 hours to prep for them, basically. When you first see them onto the rift, whereas Supernova has time to prep for like Maryville, who they'll be facing on Sunday, because they saw Maryville play last week. So they'll know that Misfortune Diego is a potential combo to come out of this team, and they have to pay respect to that Misfortune, which by the way, I'm also surprised we've not seen more of. I think Misfortune is really strong in the current meta.
Really?
Like,
Okay. I see, like, I'm not educated enough right now to know, like, I'm not playing solo queue on my own.
mhm,
Um, and I really haven't been playing the game a lot. Like, even after this, I'm gonna stream Champs queue, like, from when we're recording. So I'm kind of curious to see like what people are cooking up there. But are the lethality items too good? Does
It's
she have
lethality.
two legitimate? Okay, so it's just lethality. I was
Yeah,
gonna ask
because
you had like
she
two legit builds.
She might, but the one that I'm hearing about mostly was the lethality build, and
Okay.
you gain a lot of lane pressure, and then you just control off
Yeah.
the early team fights. And because of the way the item changes have worked, and the damage just seems to be like ramped up incredibly hard.
Hmm.
Um, and because Misfortune isn't her ult isn't very easily blockable. Like you've got Yasuo and Braum. That's about it. So even if you have a tank, it doesn't protect the rest of your team from the damage she can put out. So it gets hard to deal with her apparently. And with the snowball early game strength and snowball, yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Misfortune. So I'm just really surprised we aren't seeing more of her right now. I don't think she's necessarily gonna like be so broken you can't that you have she's a pick or ban, like 100% pick or ban.
There might be
But
a
I do
fearless thing
think
though.
she
Like it was a game 3, right?
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like
I
I
don't
think
think she has to be like like a B tier, oh, game 3, game 4 style AD carry. I actually do think she could be pickable earlier on, especially if teams do want to go for like a more team fight heavy composition. Like if you're running Rumble and have AoE anyways, right? Like you were saying, Cubby, pick up champion and kind of build a composition around that sort of idea
Mhm.
or that champion. Yeah, if you're gonna bring AoE from Rumble and CC big AoE CC from like jungle support, might as well just double down on that bot lane.
Also, I'm just gonna say I'm really tilted from this graphic that FlyQuest and Wildcard aren't in first because win percentage for me. That's got to be a tiebreaker, no? Not
I
games
think it
played.
I think it literally is too, right? Like I think
Yeah,
the
it should. It
game
better be. It better be.
yeah, I read the rule. I skimmed the rule book a
You
little
read
bit.
the rules? Okay.
I do
Okay.
think
I didn't read those rules. Come on.
all right, listen,
Someone had to have figured this out.
it's not like I went front to back. Like it's not I didn't read the full 80-page rule book, but I skimmed for highlights. And one of those was what are the tiebreakers? And I do believe it is game win
Yeah.
percentage is the
As much
first
as
tiebreaker.
I love my sports and getting things right based on sports. If I'm the one like, hey guys, this is actually what game percentage needs to like win percentage needs to matter. I think that's a problem. It might be too.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
I
read
mean,
the
it's
rules
also
because I have
what I
faith in
was on
my
the lookout
team,
for
right?
was
That's
is
the
head
real
to head
one.
gonna matter? Is
Oh, that's actually that could be
head to
interesting.
head does not
Actually,
matter. I checked
it's
that.
just game win percentage. Okay,
I believe
If
so.
it's
Okay.
tied, then is head to head next.
I don't think so. I think it's like
Ooh,
it's something else first.
could be
It's
two
like
O's.
might be. Here, hang on.
Yeah.
I got the rule book right here. I got the wiki open.
Okay. Well, while he's looking it up, can I just point out we've got two
Please.
color classes on the desk, one of whom is actually working at ACL, and it's the play-by-play who has the rule book ready to go.
I feel like I don't know why we gotta why do we gotta bring roll into it like that? I can read the rule book.
I'm just here for a good time, man. I
Okay.
don't care about the rules, just win.
NACL regular season, the teams will be ranked by the following metrics: game win percentage throughout the NACL regular season, match win percentage throughout the regular season. If teams are tied in game and match win percentage, the teams within the tie will be ranked by combined wins against the other teams within the tie. So it is head to head
Okay,
after
but that's the last sort of option.
if you're tied in game win and match win percentage.
Okay. Well, you know what? It's week one. The graphic will hopefully
It'll evolve.
yeah, it'll evolve. It'll get better. Same way like Lit and Supernova 10th, 9th, and 10th feels a little bit bad for them,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Uh,
But do we want to talk a little bit actually about Lit and Supernova? Because we still haven't seen them on the Rift yet. So Cubby,
wow. You want to talk about your own team on here? Sweet. Yeah.
oh,
No.
we do it all the time. I
Well, we
part of
want
the
to talk
agreement
about
I
week
have with
number 2 where
Supernova.
this team is
Oh,
featured
okay.
twice.
I actually, so I think I'm actually one of the few that I had Supernova ranked 3 above DSG.
Mhm,
After seeing TL, like I think it's gonna be really interesting. The AC if TL can bounce back against FlyC, who I think are kind of the if we took a poll, I think FlyQuest would probably be first in challengers with that squad. Like if we had a wide spread of data going into the season.
mhm,
Uh, I had like my ordering was FlyQuest, TL, Supernova, and then Disguised. Um, I think that Disguised having a week off, I mean, not bad for them, right? They get to go back to the shed and maybe work on some stuff, and also they get a week to see the new patch, which is really nice. Um, I'd be curious. I think Supernova, like I have high hopes for them. This is
mhm.
one of the few challenges rosters when I look at it and like the playstyles, I'm like, oh, this actually makes sense. Like you
Yeah,
said earlier that hey, Array is a really good team fighting AD. Like I think one of the things that was really slept on with Masu last year is that his team peeled for him, and Faisal is fantastic at peeling for ADs. Faisal always knows his job,
yeah.
and is very self sufficient in the top lane. Like that guy, I think pairing that with Array and Diamond is really good. And then, especially given you have Shochi mid,
Yes.
and then Kenvy's return to challengers, where I think for me the biggest thing, I still believe in Kenvy, guys. Like Kenvy has the skills. I think for me, it's just regaining confidence. This is the best place for him to do so. I want him to get that confidence back, and then I hope that the next team he goes to, he can at least try to keep it. Because I don't think being on a bottom of the table team was good for him. And I'm not saying that he didn't play bad, because he did not play well in LCS, and the fact that he's not in LCS this split is like he did not play well enough to be in LCS again, especially given how deep Jungle Pool is. But I do think that Kenby's a good player, and I really hope that he has a good showing. And I think that it might be a decent balance for Shochi, maybe having to play for jungle here and there, because Perry always, for the most part, played for Shochi.
Yep.
Um, Shochi was getting later picks. Like they were often blinding tops to give mid counter pick later. Um, I think that Shochi got a lot of resources in draft and on the Rift in that team. And hey, you know what? He did carry a lot of those games, right?
Yep.
But I actually want to see Shochi get nothing in year 2 and see how he does with that. I mean, honestly, like if we like want to grow, right? Like I can't go back and pick out games where I've been like Shochi got nothing and it was good. I remember in summer there was a Kindred Penta from like Perry once. Like I felt like Fear changed their identity every week too. Like they picked a lot of different champions. Um, yeah, I want to see some scenarios where Shochi just gets absolutely dog pissed nothing. And you know what? I want to see some scenarios where Kenvi does that too, because at least he has to prove that he learned something from LCS. I know that he's still the mechanical beast, but I think it's actually a fun pairing, and I think that they could be really good. So I actually have some decently high hopes for Supernova, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go as far as say I don't want Shochi to get any resources, but I do agree that I remember Shochi, I think it was Immortals AoE, that particular iteration of AoE. Shochi
Mhm.
didn't always get resources, and I think he actually was a really good low econ mid laner. Like he always had impact. So
Shochi?
yeah,
Damn, I gotta get. Let me check this guy's GOL. I don't remember any of these games, man. I just remember the 17 kill
this was
Tristana games and Yone
I
games,
think
whatever.
2022 spring.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like if I, a lot of resources ended up going to the bot lane because Winston was on that team, and Winston loves the bot lane, and Meech and Trevor were the bot lane for that team. So they'd
Mhm.
often funnel stuff into Meech and Trevor. So Anime Girl or Soul on the top side, and Shochi often got shortchanged a little bit in terms of being able to get resources. They got whatever they got, and oftentimes, hey, Shochi wins the lane, great, he gets resources that way. But even if he doesn't, even if he gets camped 2v1, Shochi always felt like he had impact in the game. So to me, when I think of Shochi, yes, he can carry if you give him resources, but I also think of him as a sort of I don't want to call it flex player because there's a lot of negative stuff, a lot of negative connotation with that. But I think he's a very versatile player who can kind of fit whatever role. And if you don't give him resources, he can still do a lot of good things. And if you give those resources to Array instead, that's I think the winning strategy for this team.
Mm. I am in the GOL. This doesn't have the OQs on it, so it only has like proving grounds. But Shochi is behind in gold percentage on this team, behind Meech and Soul. So
Yeah,
yeah, maybe
yeah,
that is. I maybe I do have to go and see some of those VODs as well. I do agree, though. I do think the Supernova team is going to probably end up needing to be mid jungle. There's still a question of who gets the resources, but I feel like, especially now being with Shochi again and being with another kind of star jungler like Kenvi, I think Faisal will naturally get into more of a weak side role. And I do think they're going to play to scale with Array, just because that's kind of been his style. Maybe Diamond changes that, but feels like it's been what Array has gone for most of his career. So I would kind of presume that this is going to be a big mid jungle team, but I'm very curious to see what they come out with and what kind of spicy picks Jochi has prepared as well, because he seems
And
very excited for Fearless. He is the one who originally leaked that we're going Fearless. If I'm not mistaken, he just couldn't contain it. So I'm really excited to see how he seizes that opportunity.
uh, I mean, you can't really play mid jungle at the moment
True,
because you got to go bot.
true.
So the meta of the new map might dictate that, but I would love to see Kenvi and Shochi try to out hands to people because I miss
yeah.
that from Kenvi. The Kenvi folder from 22 was so fun. 21 and 22, oh wow, it was really fun.
Yeah.
This is the year. Okay, lit. What about lit though? Because I know generally the community isn't super high on lit. I would personally like to put lit higher on paper. It's very hard to, but they are my sort of dark horse team to kind of pop off a little bit. So I'm curious about hearing your thoughts, especially Cubby, because I know Gordon and I discussed this last week a little bit.
Um, I think the Wit might benefit from the fact that they like have some direction. I also am looking forward to seeing Rock Boom play.
Mhm.
Um, I I still have this team like probably lower to like potentially might get relegated. I think the biggest positives are that Kisno got really good reviews in Champs Queue. Not just from people like at this level. Like Kisno actually impressed some people in that queue, and I thought messages
Mhm.
played all right as well. So I kind of hope that we see some of that from them on the stage. And I give them a lot of props for grinding out Champs Queue. Also, Kisno, like before they put duo restrictions on, was playing with Sujet a lot. Um, and I think Kisno finishes like one of the best junglers in the queue. So I want to see him put that to the Rift too. Be fun.
Yeah. I really we talked about it last week, but I would really love to see the big step up from Kisno here. I
Yeah.
was kind of spending a lot of summer crossing my fingers for it because Kisno had this like rapid ascent right through the open qualifiers. He's playing for like no name CB Gaming in spring qualifiers at first, and then he gets this call up to Supernova because Hyper gets called up to fly FAM.
Yep.
So he
Mhm.
gets like his kind of big break after one OQ, which is way faster than most people get it. I think he lived up to that call enough, right? He looked a little uncomfortable playing with all these veterans, playing with how strong that Supernova team was. They managed to qualify. They all get dropped. They reform under Lit. They go for it again. And when they were coming for it again in summer on the Lit team, that's where I was really looking for Kisno to like make a big step up and be like this top tier jungler. And I didn't really see it. I think, especially in the promotion tournament, he fell a little short. But now that he's doing so well in Champions Queue, I wonder if this year two is going to be kind of the big breakout for Kisno. Because he didn't. It's not like he was one of those guys grinding OQs for forever until he kind of had that step up to make the promotion. First OQ year was 2023. This is his sophomore year of playing any level of comp. I'm really excited to see what Kisno can bring.
Yeah, I think he'll need to step up. Yeah, I'm excited for Rock Boom, of course, bot lane, probably the most exciting part. Him coming in, actually replacing Sajid. And top lane is actually the other one I'm kind of interested in because Dragoon is probably the best top laner in OQs. And now he's stepping up to the NACL plate. And I want to see what Dragoon can do up against these guys. He's played against quite a few of them, right? I think he's played
Yeah.
Quacker,
I
Niles, Phillips, Zamudo.
I mean, I feel like Dragoon for me has always been someone that I actually really wanted to see in Challengers League, and I was
Yep.
really bummed like when he did earn the opportunity with Supernova that he actually like wasn't on that roster the next split. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to see him in the league. Like he's someone that I've been covering Dragoon since I started casting, and I actually feel like he has like improved and gotten better. And
Yeah.
I really hope that he can prove it at this level too. So yeah. Also, he's willing to play Trundle top, which is busted right now. So let's go.
I feel like a
Also,
lot of these guys are
Quacker
willing to
just
play
proved
Trundle.
Darius playable, so
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
and it's getting buffed next patch.
Oh, it
Oh,
got
yeah.
fat buffs on this patch.
Yeah.
I the patch notes, I might have like, pulled them up because I'm gonna hopefully stream some CQ in a little bit, when the pros get out of scrims. Oh boy, they were like, "Oh, Stridebreaker is not the same anymore for Darius. Let's give him just more armor pen and make him heal for 45% of his max HP if he hits 5 people with Q, it's fine."
Yep.
And they reduce mana cost in lane. I know like 5 mana doesn't sound a lot, but it's 1/6 of that spell. Like he
Yeah,
can spam an extra 2, I think. Now
he
it's messed up.
the so the big thing with that is that it'll actually enable him to fish for ease more because like that is where a lot of his mana's at. So,
Mhm.
like, when Q isn't nuking your mana pool anymore, then you can actually,
Yeah.
like, maybe throw out a bonus ear or 2, and I think that's really good.
It's funny because I feel like at any other league, we wouldn't be discussing this, but because it is an ACL, we have so many good Darius players here, it becomes an actual issue where we're like,
Also,
yeah,
does
yeah.
anyone know by the does taking the because the mana cost got reduced on Crippling Strike, right? Or was it
Estimate.
Decimate?
It's
It was
Decimate, yeah.
Decimate. Okay, well then my point doesn't even matter. I was wondering if they reduce the mana cost on Crippling Strike, does the refund stay the same to where now you can go positive mana? But I guess that doesn't matter because that's not where they reduced mana cost.
Yeah. Well, still, it's nasty.
It is.
Actually, Ezreal getting a bit of a buff too. Ray used to play that a lot, so hey.
Ooh. Well, yeah, and so that's Supernova. That's lit. Do you want to take 2 seconds to talk about the other matchups next week? We got TL versus Fly, so the showdown between the two LCS orgs, and then we got Wildcard versus Mirage, who both came out of the. I think Wildcard exceeded expectations. Mirage maybe about met expectations. TL versus Fly is an interesting thing to talk about, though.
I think I'd have been a lot more excited for TL versus Fly before I saw them last week.
That's true.
I mean, I'm excited to see if TL can like at least put up a better showing.
That's true.
I feel like that's like not the expectation that we have from TL. I also think that like it's worth to
Mhm.
be like noted that this is the first time in a while we haven't seen this squad be coached by Spawn directly.
True.
True. It's
And
MASH now, right?
it's really hard. Yeah, it is Smash. It's really hard to talk about coaches and the impact that they have on teams because it so often switches. Not to mention the pieces so often switch. I
Mhm.
feel very confident saying that Spawn had a very positive impact on TL and the years that he coached these squads that he had. It's there are consistent things that I can draw upon, whether it's how rigid their macro is or how they are able to execute comps, like different types of comps too, if they're going to play 2 lanes or 3 lanes, that every iteration of TL was able to do. Um, and I really hope that like we see that. I'm gonna kind of chalk it up to like Romer didn't come in until later on. Probably a little bit of comm issue, and also the fact that they just haven't scrimmed together as long, given the challengers just started. But I really hope that we see this TLC kind of improve and buff up because they have been one of our top orgs for a long time in Academy and Challengers, pretty much ever since Spawn stepped in. Because before Spawn stepped in, they were a 10th place team, and ever since then they've been top three. So I think it'd be really cool if Mash could continue that legacy, especially while Spawn's, at the helm in that org as a whole.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Something that this does also give me the opportunity to talk about something that I've just kind of been cooking in my head for the last week, especially after having done two different like preseason reviews, spent some more time looking at footage, spent some more time looking into players and just thinking about the league. Is I do think the kind of a lot of the NACL community kind of is a little guilty of painting Romer and Quad with the same brush a little bit, just because of the scenarios they find themselves in, right? They both come in on these LCS affiliate teams. They're both from Korea. They both have a lot of LCKCL experience, yada
Yeah.
yada yada. They're both contending to promote into LCS versus the native mid laners that they've got there because both teams are holding open import slots for them. There's a lot of things that you could say to draw parallels between Quad and Romer, but these guys are not like equivalent players. Romer, I think, having spent 3 years in LCKCL and never standing out enough to get that call out, compared to Quad, who has come up and down multiple times, and I didn't even realize this until I went in and counted, has 87 career LCK games. He has played
Wow.
so much professional League of Legends. Like, I think it's totally unfair to actually compare these guys one to one like that. And I think it shows in their week one performances, right? Not and obviously Romer came in a little bit late, didn't get as much scrim time, but like Romer, not looking exceptional up against Dark Wings, who most folks don't consider a top mid laner in the league, versus Quad, who comes in and I think looks very, very good up against Young, who a lot of people had pegged as LCS ready. So I think it's just something to note, right? Is that the pedigree between these two, despite the similarity in their narratives, are very different. And I think Quad is already starting to show that he could be number one player at ACL this year, and
So yeah,
it
I
wouldn't
mean,
be
a
crazy.
couple things on that. Like I didn't have Young as being LCS ready. I didn't have any of the
Fair, yeah.
mids.
I know you were lower on Young
Yeah, I
than a
didn't
lot
have
of folks.
any of the mids being LCS ready. I think if any of them in NA deserved a shot, it would have been Harry. I think Harry, and then probably like Shochi. I think that Young sees fights really well. I want to see Young lane a little bit better. Um, and
Spyrax?
Spyrax, I mean, I don't know where Spyrax is at. I would have loved to see Spyrax. I would have loved to see Copy get a shot.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
but
rest in peace.
yeah, I think that the thing I was most impressed about with Quad is that he was actually playing with Shaden. That's not a lot of time like they've spent together. His Yone game, they absolutely just fisted like together. It was actually disgusting like what they did as a team.
Agree. I think they looked really, really
Yeah.
good.
No, they absolutely just like nuke the game. There's nothing else to say.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. I was waiting to see if we would end on something else besides fisting them, but okay.
No, it's yeah,
You know what?
they
That's
just
how they
fisted
ended
them.
the match, so that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, just It'll be an interesting showdown, but I think it's yeah, to round out my point, I think I think Quad's probably gonna crush Romer, and I don't think that should be like seen as a huge surprise.
We'll see. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want to see TL like just play better as a whole.
Mm,
That as well.
I expect more out of TL.
I would not mind seeing Keel get like a little bit more involved. I think he was really, really good on wild card with Soligo. I would hope to see a little bit more of that alongside Romer, without Soligo necessarily being, the best individual player in the world. I think they were able to pair up together and do a lot of really cool stuff. I
yeah.
think that's about gonna do it for week number 2, episode number 2. Kept it much shorter than we did last season. Thanks so much for joining us, Cubby. Anybody you want to shout out? Anything you want to say? Uh, any
No,
shows you want to plug before we sign
uh,
out?
no, thank you guys for doing this. I'm on Hotline League every week, Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. I appreciate you guys reaching out, and it's always fun to do these. And then you can find me at Cubby XX on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. And yeah, just support Challengers League. Fun league. I don't know. I really like this league. I did a kind of a cool feature with LCS this week where it was like an ad kind of covering like some of the players that did come through Challengers League. And I found like a couple of really cool quotes. Like we had Palafox saying like after like he won in 2020, that he wanted to be the best NA mid at Worlds, and like he kind of did that this past year, which was actually really cool to like kind of dig through the tape. So I'll be working on that again this week. There's like a couple of other things that like didn't get done just given like the time cramp or crunch that we had with our editor. So I'm excited for that to hopefully find LCS again this week. But yeah, no, thanks you guys for doing this, and good luck to Supernova and all the other teams in Challengers League. And yeah, I'll best of luck covering OQs and everything else that is going to be going on in the space, dude. OQs looked crazy this week.
Yeah. If you
Yeah.
didn't catch the games, there are VODs available. They weren't streamed live, but do check them out because there were a lot of upsets. A lot of craziness actually happened in the OQ. So I don't want to spoil
Oh
any of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
I saw Winthrop did drop a game.
Winthrop dropped 2 games.
Who did they
Yeah.
drop to?
I have to go and double check who, and I will
They
go
might
and
have had
do
like a
that.
little bit of a break.
Yeah, but while I
I don't,
go and
I don't
check
want to kill for
that,
them.
do also want to call out that the open qualifier VODs are probably most accessible on Running the Rift's YouTube channel. From this stage on, once they start getting into group stage and elimination rounds and stuff, they should be on Rally Cry's channel. So
Yes.
go ahead and check both of those off.
Shout out
And
to who is it? Dylan with running the rift. Yanni
Yes.
doing it as well.
Yep.
And yeah, Gordo, you
There's
were
a
part
whole
of that
list of
too.
casters involved.
there were a whole
But
bunch
yeah.
of us. Yeah, we were covering like 6 or
Hey,
7
props to
ones.
you guys for real. Honestly, shout out to all the casters that are like doing this. I think that it's really important to like cover OQs, and it's a lot of fun. I
Thank you. I do think
Yeah,
in particular shout out to Sherv from Kingfish
yes,
Taco /
Yep.
Running the Rift and Rare Adam from Running the Rift as well.
yeah.
They were the big organizing forces behind it. The rest of us just kind of showed up and went where we were told.
No,
So
And I think
huge
honestly,
shout out
Mad
to
if
them.
Magical has some as well on his YouTube channel, though I
yeah,
know he had some like technical difficulty
Mad
stuff.
Magical
So
as well. Yes, he did a lot of those
yeah.
games. He did most of
cool.
the games that we couldn't cover live.
And
That was
there
awesome.
is
Alex is great.
also Reliquai coverage. I think Grapes and Hawks are heading it up, and they'll be dropping. Okay, Leanne, our producer, has said this Thursday on the LCS Challengers Twitch. So
Oh,
check that
sweet.
out, and that would give you like a quick wrap up, a quick sort of coverage of everything that happened. Those two are doing God's work right now because that is how
Yeah.
many games like they have to watch, and it's insane, man. But yeah,
Yeah.
should be
Well,
fun.
Winthrop lost to BlackRock Esports and Morningstar White. We won't get
Yes, morning
too
Didn't
too.
BlackRock like take
They
like
went
top?
5-0. Yep, they
Also,
went
BlackRock went
that's a
5-0.
5-0.
hilarious name.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's hilarious. Oh, it's great.
Robbie Bob looking to make his return. Inori
Oh,
B.
Robbie. Wait, was that the Robbie Bob Kitsuo team?
Yes, it is. It's the
Yes.
Decoy Kitsuo Rabu Bob Inori B Pakis.
That's a
So
decent team, actually. I've heard some decent things about Nora B.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited.
And
He's next generation. Get excited for that one. So we
Yeah.
will see when
as
he's the next 80 carry in NACL. This outro went so much longer.
I mean, there are a lot of shout outs.
Good.
We had
A lot of
OQs.
shout
They're
outs.
like,
Shout out to Risen Champs and Aegis Champs, by the way. Applications open for both of them for folks who want to compete in Tier 3 that either got eliminated from open qualifiers or are still playing in open qualifiers and just want to play in more leagues. So That's my last shout out. I think that's everything. Thank you very much for everybody who tuned on in. We'll see you next week.